Hello and welcome to Your Broken Galaxy. I am Broken. Today I am doing the 10th fight of the first round of my 128 Star Wars character versus series. It is Galen Merrick versus R2-D2. So, good old Galen Merrick has been tasked with killing, or should I say, killing, Bail Organa. So, Lady Eclipse flies him to Alderaan, and he's like, okay, you know what? I'm gonna sneak in and do this right. So, Galen Merrick sneaks in and silently worms his way through the palace. He sees a guard and snaps his neck with the Force. He sees another guard and collapses his skull with the Force. He sees another guard and stabs him right in the face with his lightsaber. After a few minutes and a dozen or so more dead guards, he hears beep, 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 beep. He turns around to see that R2-D2 has discovered the last dead body that he had left so carelessly in the middle of the hallway. R2 turns his little eye camera towards Galen, who says, "Come here, you droid." But R2 just pivots and starts rolling away down the hall before Galen can stop him with the Force. Merrick comes running the 50 feet back to where R2 was, but since R2 was down the hallway, he seemed to have disappeared into one of the rooms. Galen closes his eyes and reaches out through the Force in order to sense the droid, but he can't feel him as if he were a living being. Galen hears the sound from behind him, and he turns around. There's nothing there. Then the lights all simultaneously shut off. He hears, again coming from down the hallway. He runs down the hall and into an open room. It's a tall room with a balcony on the second floor looking over what he thinks is a dining table. He looks around, just seeing tiny pins of light coming from different electrical devices. "Where are you, droid?" he murmurs to himself. He hears all the doors slam shut. He walks over to one to try and open it, but it's locked. He takes out his lightsaber, and just as he's about to plunge it into the door, he hears beep, beep, coming from above him. His reflexes kick in, and he jumps up and over the handrail, landing on the second floor. But there's nothing there. Suddenly, the area turns red with emergency lights, and a siren begins to sound. Galen is mad because he knows that it's going to make it a big pain getting out undetected. "I'm going to kill you, droid, you and your master," he says. He hears the beep come from directly behind him. He turns and grabs a blue and silver trash can with the Force, flinging it off the balcony. "Arrgh!" he mutters in aggravation, seeing that there was an intercom system just behind where the trash can was sitting. It's time to end this. Suddenly he hears rockets ignite from below, so he jumps back down, only to see that two torches were lit at the side of the room. "Must be to keep food warm," he says, walking up to them. Then suddenly the torches tilt, blasting his midsection with fire. He jumps away, realizing that he's suffering from third-degree burns all over his abdomen. "You horrible little droid! I am going to enjoy breaking you." He uses the Force to break open a door and rip it off the wall, and then walks through. As he is going, he isn't worrying about stealth anymore. The emergency lights are all on. As he is walking through another door, it suddenly and violently shuts, slamming Starkiller in between the wall and the door, and causing a great deal of pain, including a broken left hand. He uses his lightsaber to cut through the door and then flings it off himself with the Force. Then hears beep, boo, off in the distance of a long corridor. He runs, but every time he makes it to one of the walls, he has to stab its control panel with his lightsaber, just in case. He finally comes to a small room from following the beeps. He sees dozens of red chairs, and suddenly, projected on the wall opposite the entrance, he sees a screen appear. It lights up with the words, "You won't find me." "I will end you and Organa, droid," Starkiller says. R2 sends a text message to the screen. "My master has already escaped." "Arrgh!" Galen screams in frustration. "You're not very good at being an assassin, are you?" R2 writes. Suddenly, the room begins to fill with smoke. The room was outfitted as a specialized theater, equipped with the ability to project scents, sounds, gusts of winds, and all other effects to enhance watching movies or holo videos. Galen sees the red glow of his lightsaber diffuse through the smoke. Then suddenly he hears the steam all being sucked out of the room through vents. He smirks and says, "I'm coming, droid." But the door again slams shut, and Merrick quickly realizes that the vents are still pulling air out. In a moment, the oxygen is gone from the room, and he begins to struggle with his breath. He runs to the door, but as he is going, the brightest flash he could imagine hits him, as R2 ran every light in the room to its maximum potential, so much so that they all popped and broke. Merrick is dazed from the light. He takes another step towards the door so he can break through and get his oxygen. He's surprised to see that as soon as he gets within 3 feet of it, it automatically opens, and he is pushed backwards, just barely, by the rush of air flooding into the room. He breathes deep and then steps forward, but just as his leg clears the threshold of the door, it slams shut. "Oh, gosh!" it, droid! His ankle is broken, and he knows it. I am going to be the end of you, he shouts. He stands and puts his weight on his ankle, feeding on the pain from his burns, his broken hand, his broken ankle. He draws deep from the dark side. He slashes through the door and pushes it away. Merrick walks down another corridor and emerges, finding himself in the hangar. He looks around and can see no movement. Then suddenly, he hears the telltale sound of a metal spinning on oiled bearings. He looks at his ship to see that the turbo laser turret has turned towards him. He raises his saber just as the laser fires a massive bolt. He hits it with his saber, but it barrels through and into his right shoulder, only glancing him, but burning it straight to the bone. The bulk of the blast hit the wall behind him, causing an explosion which threw him forward, slamming him hard into and through the cockpit windshield of the ship. He loses consciousness, and after a few moments, his eyes open. His right arm is completely useless, and the blast, he assumes, has shattered his spine, breaking through the cockpit, all but killed him. He can't move his legs, but manages to use his left arm to prop himself up against the wall of the cockpit. He hears beep boo from down the hallway that leads out to the cockpit, and his eyes go wide. I'm coming for you, droid, he bluffs. After a minute of silence, the longest minute of Starkiller's life, he thinks that the droid may have heard him and ran. He looks out of the shattered glass of the cockpit, and there, rising in the air on twin rockets, projecting from his legs, is R2-D2. The droid maneuvers through the hole that was opened by Galen's body and lands a few feet in front of him. Beep, 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 R2 says. Galen is terrified. He reaches with his broken left hand and in an attempt to use the Force to break the droid. R2 stops moving forward. R2's head rotates to point the eye camera towards Galen's hand, and then R2 starts shaking slowly back and forth as though his bolts are being pulled apart. A look of pained determination crosses Galen's face, and he screams with all of the fury that he has left. Beep boo, R2 says, as he stops jostling himself back and forth as though to taunt the young Sith. He rolls towards the downed opponent, who is now crying on the ground, saying, please, please. R2 opens one of the tool compartments on the front of his chassis and points a sharp tool directly at Merrick's head. He rolls forward, and as Galen turns away in fear, he knows his end is coming. R2 thrusts the device out, just missing Merrick's head, and inserting it into a data port on the wall. After a moment, Galen squints his eyes, barely opening them, to see the droid retract the tool and roll backwards, then turn towards the door and start rolling out. R2 stops just as he got outside the door. The droid's head rotates slowly to look at Galen, and R2 suddenly lurches forward just half an inch, only as a feinting technique, but it causes Galen to flinch in fear and then in pain. And R2 says, beep boo, and rolls away. After a minute, the cockpit door slams shut, and Galen finally thinks it's over. Then he hears the engines ignite. What's happening? He asks desperately. The ship lifts off the ground and rotates so that the front faces the front of the hangar. No, the cockpit! Galen half screams and half cries. The ship blasts out of the cockpit and reaches hundreds of miles an hour. The wind is howling in and striking him with a cold ferocity as he launches up through the atmosphere. After a minute of enduring the torture, the blue sky fades to black, and Galen screams his last breath. There's no oxygen left, and he begins to feel his weightless body lift off of the cockpit floor. There's no air to transfer sound, but he has used his broken hand to grab onto a handle on the wall, and through the vibrations of the ship, he can hear the telltale sign of a hyperdrive engine powering up. His eyes go wide as the stars grows long, and he's blasted into oblivion. Well, that is my video for today. Not quite as comical as my usual ones, I realized partway through. It's a little bit bleak, it's maybe a little terrifying, and perhaps I should have released it before Halloween instead of the day after Halloween. But yes, R2-D2 is the winner and the source of all of Starkiller's nightmares from this day forward. If you would like to vote on who wins these fights, go ahead and check the link in my description below for my Patreon. Anyone who signs up can vote, And whoever wins the vote wins the fight. Other than that, thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and all that garbage.